Hey guys, today I'm reviewing one of my new custom action figures. This is the Horseman Death from the video game Darksiders 2. He was made from Marvel Legends base body, specifically one of the AIM soldiers, and stands over 6 inches tall. Now this was a commission figure, but I was given free rein when it came to certain style choices such as his armor and scythes, both of which you can customize in-game. And luckily, this commission happened to coincide with when Darksiders 2 was free on Xbox Live, so I got to spend some time with the game and kind of play as Death for a little bit, and then pick what an armor set and a scythe design that I found interesting and that I would want to sculpt and paint. I also included some fabric to bring some of my mixed media work into this and to more closely match his in-game appearance. So let's take a look at this guy's articulation. I wanted to preserve the Marvel Legends articulation, which I've come to know and love because this guy benefits from some dynamic poses. So let's start from the top. The head, which I always make them pretty easily removable in order to access them for painting and sculpting, is on a swivel and a hinge. Now it is restricted by the hair and the scarf, but I chose to do that in order to maintain the design of those. The shoulders, disc and swivel, and they have full range of motion and are not restricted. Bicep swivel on both arms, and double jointed elbows. Now the hands, I did end up making, not entirely from scratch, but I did have to come up with a way to, Death has very specific and expressive hands, so I did take a hand that had this finger joint right here for the forefingers, and I ended up cutting off the fingers, inserting some wire in there, and then sculpting larger ones to more convey the sense of what his hands look like in the game. And then because of this hinge, I don't have to have some alternate hands for gripping the scythes so they can close. And then the wrist joint is basic swivel and hinge. His right hand has some fabric strips over it because of the costume choices, but the hinge and the swivel still maintained. I also preserved his ab crunch and his waist swivel. His armored pieces at his side here are actually free floating, so they do not interfere with his articulation and can be adjusted as needed. He also has his 90-degree hips, which go out. Now these are restricted by some of the costume elements right here. The upper thigh swivel is still there, and he has his double jointed knees. These knee pads are actually floating and separate and are attached by a strip of elastic so they can move freely, not hindering the articulation. And then he has his ankle pivot and the hinge right here. A little hampered by some of the fabric work here, but in order to maintain that look, it was necessary. So, I'm often asked how I maintain articulation and that I handle my figures with confidence, even though they're custom figures. And I mean, I do spend, months with these figures working on them, sculpting, so I'm going to know where to handle them. But what I always tell people is that yes, these are fragile, one-of-a-kind figures, and even though I do use top-of-the-line materials and take great care, I do know how to handle them because I am the one handling them for such a long time. But yes, they are display pieces, and even though I include a lot of articulation, it's still wise to be careful. So let's take a look at some of the detail work I put into this guy. Now, as far as details go, everything you can see on this guy was hand sculpted and hand painted, the fabric treated and painted and molded into shape. So the first thing I had to do with this guy was look at his proportions, because the game aesthetic has that World of Warcraft look, and then match the proportions. So one of the reasons I chose this body was because of the giant shoulders, and then he's known for, some slim upper arms, giant forearms, giant hands, and then the rest was just looking at his specific torso, the way his muscles are modeled in the game, so on and so forth. After that, it was just a matter of building up the necessary areas, like his lower legs, which are larger, and then his thighs, which are thinner, and then sculpting the armor on top of it. I believe this is called the Necro set, with this bone skeletal motif that I really liked and I knew would be awesome to paint because I love painting bone effects, weathered bone effects. So, for the free-floating armor pieces like his knee pads, these side pieces right here, and this groin armor, I used styrene, which is thin plastic card material. I sculpted over that, sculpted all the details, and then it's lightweight enough to move. And that's my go-to with armor, especially if it has to interact with, fabric and other hard pieces, hard sculpted pieces. He also has some fabric around this hand, and of course his scarf. And for the head, the long hair especially, I use my wire technique, where I use a very small pin drill, insert some small gauge wire, and then let it hang down and sculpt over that, and that provides superstructure for any kind of long hair or flowy bits, kind of like the beards I did on the dwarf Slayer. And of course, hand sculpted, hand painted his mask, which is iconic to this character. And then we have his iconic weapon, his scythes, and I looked at a lot of different designs of varying complexity, in-game models and all that, and I chose this one with this demon motif at the end here. And I really like the shape of the blades, and then the glowing runes, which were fun to paint. And then the hafts are wrapped with actual leather and painted. Alright guys, here's the Horseman Death from Darksiders 2. This guy was lots of fun, really cool details, cool paint apps. Good times working on this one. And he was a commission piece for those of you asking and who are curious. Yes, I am taking commission work full-time, so feel free to ask if you have any questions, and I will leave my contact information at the end and in the comments. Thanks again, take care.